Hi everyone, Magnus here, and today's video is for those of you who are probably in between like the 900 to 12, 13, even 1400 rating range, who have started to notice that just doing puzzles and all these tips that YouTubers are telling you, like early, intermediate, beginner level stuff, and it's just sort of stopped working as well. You can't just seem to do puzzles anymore to gain lots and lots of rating. Now, in this video, I'm going to give you my number one piece of advice that got me, as you can see, from this hump all the way down here, from 1271. In about 4 days, I was on just winning non-stop after these changes, all the way up to 1513 in Rapid. So, as you can see here, it was basically just on a non-stop winning streak. I got 13 in a row before getting a couple losses, but as you can see, it was still more wins than losses all the way up to 1500. And as you can see, I even almost got to about 1600. So, the first, I mean, not the first, but like the big tip is all about game analysis. You can often, like I said, get by earlier on just doing puzzles non-stop, trying to get your tactics down. But as you get better, the mistakes that you make are becoming slightly less obvious and a little bit more nuanced. Not just, oh, I hung a piece, but rather maybe some more positional problems, pawn play, and potentially not exploiting the openings as well as you can. So the first thing I'm going to do is run you through a game that I played earlier on when I was still around 1200 before this big break, and it started in a Sicilian. I was clearly learning the Sicilian defense, but obviously I wasn't that familiar, and my opponent goes for a weird sideline. Now, what I would recommend that you do is try and use the opening explorer. In chess.com, you can use this. But if you don't want to give chess.com your hard-earned money, you can equally go and click this share button in the bottom right. You'll be able to see it next to add to library, practice with computer, saved analysis, and one that says share. And after you click that share button, if you can find it yourself, it's, like I said, right in the bottom right. You can go down to the PGN, copy it to your clipboard, and after you do that, you can go over to the free Elite Chess Analysis, which actually has a stronger engine anyway, and then you just go down to where the PGN is, you paste it in, you import the PGN, and all of a sudden your full game is there, and you can even use the Elite Chess Masters database, which I think has slightly more games and is just a better database, and it's free, so do definitely take advantage of Elite Chess. It's a great website, charity run, and all free to use. So, like I said, in this game, we have this slightly non-standard setup, which you are going to see a lot if you want to play the Sicilian, like I do. And I went for pawn e6, which is standard, against this bishop c4. As you can see, I knew a little bit. I knew that after the bishop comes to c4, you like to play e6 to try and block this bishop. So this is fantastic. And after they go d4, as you can see, this is now a very unusual move. Only 2 games in the Elite Chess database here. All of them go capture. And after queen captures, you can already see that there are no games in the database. Now, at this point, what I would recommend that you do is try and think what the best move here is for black to play. Now, if I were just looking at this, I would say, okay, knight c6 hits the queen, has to be a good move, you're developing the knight with tempo, and then I would turn on the engine to check what the best move is, and it is in fact knight c6. Then I would turn the engine back off, and I would go back, continue going through the game, see what my opponent did, and now once again I would try and come up with what the best move is without the engine on, and then you check with the engine. Now this is very important in terms of your analysis. You don't want to have the engine turned on while you're looking at your games. If you have the engine turned on, you're just going to be blinded by the evaluation, and you're not going to be thinking how you actually are thinking in the game itself. That way you kind of become a bit disconnected, and you sort of like develop a bit of a crutch for using the engine in terms of your analysis and your thinking process, and you don't want to let that happen. You want to try and have your own internal evaluation and analysis rather than letting the computer just tell you what to do. So, for example, in this game, I ended up playing knight to f6, But if I was looking at this in terms of my analysis, I'd be thinking, okay, let's look at some aggressive options. Maybe knight to e5. It's not a standard move. It doesn't quite follow the beginner concepts, which I was following very rigorously at the time. Like, you got to develop your pieces one at a time and castle. But this move does guarantee me the bishop pair, which, as a slightly more experienced player, you'll know that that's quite valuable. And at this point, I turn on the engine, say, okay, what's the best move? Turns out knight e5 is very strong, going for the bishop and the queen. So these are the kind of nuances you want to be picking up on as you try and improve your chess understanding. Of course, you're going to be learning even more rules, but it's all about the analysis and sort of the minutiae as you get better into this intermediate advanced area. So we continue looking through the games, knight f6, knight to f3. And now, basically, what would I play here? Probably d6 or bishop to e7. Both make a lot of sense to me. These would be my two candidate moves. Now, let's check with the engine. Engine actually likes pawn to a6 more than these two. It likes pawn to a6, probably to go pawn to b5, and then fianchetto this bishop on the long diagonal. This is actually quite a standard Taimanov idea, so that's very useful. I would, if I were back 1500, I would say, okay, let's lock this idea away, and whenever I see this bishop like this that could be vulnerable on the c4 square, and I've got this e6 pawn set up, I can go a6, b5, fianchetto my bishop, and put some pressure on this weak e pawn. And then what I would do is sort of file that away in my head as like a kind of chunk. And by a chunk, I mean like a kind of position which looks very similar. So I would like assign this position as bishop on c4, pawn on e6, Taimanov structure with these two knights. You can go a6, b5, and fianchetto. That's what I mean in terms of filing away. Turns out I played d5. This isn't a bad move at all. But now, after bishop d7, it's getting a little bit passive, and bishop d6 I think is a big mistake, because rook to e1, and my king didn't quite castle in time. As you can see in the game, I kind of got an unpleasant position, IQP, black's worse. I got my pawn structure damaged, that's not what you want. And eventually the game kind of fell apart. And now what you want to do in this situation is say, okay, where did it start slipping away? Obviously, there are going to have been some blunders in the game. And you want to try and eliminate blunders. You don't want to blunder as much. Well, how do you not blunder as much? Don't get in a bad position. If you don't get in bad positions, you're not going to blunder as much. So what I would do in this situation is I would turn back on the engine and see where the evaluation started to slip. So already, pawn d5 might not be the best move to give myself the isolated queen pawn, but at the same time, it's not that bad. I think the huge mistake here was the ultra-passive bishop d7. It does break the pin, but it's not getting castled and getting my king to safety. So after bishop to d7, as you can see, the engine's already giving an advantage because white can apply pressure, white can castle quick and bring a rook to the middle, right? So, as small as the inaccuracy may look, I think that in this game, it was pretty much lost on bishop d7. Of course, I'm not saying that I actually lost the game objectively on bishop d7. I'm just saying that I made life a lot more difficult, and every time you make these inaccuracies, you have to be more and more accurate in the game, which is unlikely given that you're also going to be feeling worse about your position and probably less confident. So basically, after bishop d6, it had fully slipped. I think I had to go bishop to e7 to break this pin in the future and allow myself to castle on rook to e1. But once again, this looks pretty passive with this setup here, and I've got this kind of awkward pawn that can be blockaded, so definitely wouldn't be liking the look of this either. So if I were to be analyzing for the first time, my big takeaway from this game would be all the way back here. I would have one takeaway, I'd actually have two takeaways from this game. First one would be this a6 b5 plan. And I have another takeaway, which is that this is just a tactic. Like, getting the bishop is good, and this fork gets the bishop. So actually, three takeaways for this one. Fork gets the bishop. Number two is this a6 b5 plan. Store that as a chunk. And finally, need to castle a little bit quicker. Can't afford for these passive bishop moves, so I would castle as quick as possible. I'd even consider writing those things down, filing them away, or just if you've got the good like mental, if you've got good memory, just file it away in your memory. Say, okay, those are my 3 takeaways from that game. I'm gonna move on to the next game and try and take away something from that as well. Your losses are great learning opportunities as long as you take advantage of them. If you just move on to the next game and you don't even think about it, you're not going to learn from your mistakes. And to finish off the video for you guys, I've got one more game that I played, and this was later on as I started my big winning streak, and we're going to see how I took on some ideas that I've picked up earlier on from analyzing and filing away these chunks. So in this game, pawn to d6, there is obviously these pawn pushes. When this is a chunk that when there's a knight on either c6 or f6 and you can push e5 or d5, generally you want to kick those horses around and get lots of pawn space, which is exactly what I did. f4, even more space. More space with your pawns is a good thing as long as you can support them. Okay, I played bishop to b5. This is an inaccuracy. I think if I were to have another takeaway from this game, this is definitely not a good idea. Should not be taking the knight with the bishop unprovoked. Generally, bishops are slightly more valuable with knights, so this wasn't great, but also it's not that bad. I then developed my knight. This is great, looking to castle. And after the bishop came out, I actually think that this move, knight e2, although considered an accuracy, was very creative, as I wanted this move pawn to c4 and pawn to b3, and I wanted to create the connect 4 and this really solid pawn chain. Knight to c3 is objectively better because it hits the bishop, and the bishop has to go back to d7, as if it were to go here, there would be a simple pawn to b3 probably. The bishop would have to go b5, and I could just fianchetto, and I could always play a4, or I just take it, and then I will castle. White is much better because of how little development black is and how cramped they are. e6 is always unpleasant because you can take it and the f-file gets open. So this game actually was pretty short. I got c4 in, played b3, apparently a mistake. I think it's not too bad. Castling probably would be the move I play nowadays, or e5 for that matter. But after everything, this was another mistake because they had this in-between move, and that's another tactical idea that I would take away in analysis. But after these exchanges, they missed it. I got my big center. They ended up getting their bishop trapped. Win the bishop. King to f2 is always nice because now I'm threatening to bring the rook. And they missed it. And we got the queen. Won the game in a couple moves by resignation after the bishop drops 2. So I really hope that this advice does help you get to your rating goal. If it does, and you found this helpful, please do consider liking and subscribing, as that would help me out. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.